Hello. Hello. How's everybody doing? Welcome to Creating Successful Events. It's the final, one of the final talks of today, which is a really successful event. So thanks everyone for coming down to the Launchpad conference. We're going to be here with you for the next hour. We'll take some questions at the end. So if anybody has anything they want to ask us, just save it to the end. We'll just kick off with a little bit of an introduction to ourselves. I'm Ash. I'm Festival Manager of Leeds Jazz Festival. I work for Sirius on the programming team. They do London Jazz Festival and some other tours. And I've worked freelance as like an artist liaison at venues and festivals like Glastonbury and stuff. So yeah, I'm your chair today. And do you guys want to introduce yourselves? Go on, Chris.
Is this working? Hey up everyone, my name's Chris. I run the Hyde Park Folk Club and I'm a promoter pretty much because that's my title. And I run the Hyde Park Folk Festival as well. And I mean with folk, so I love folk, mean with Folk Club as well, I just can't get enough. And I sometimes promote with other promoters like Brudenell and Please Please You in York, and I'm a musician as well.
Hello everyone, I'm not Emma. Emma couldn't be here today. So my name's Izzy. I mean you can call me Emma if you want, but that might be a bit weird. I run two organisations, one called Girls Can Play Guitar and one called Groovy Shoes. My day job is coordinating the events for Leeds and South Wales Students' Union, so kind of events all round. I've worked alongside Launchpad and Come Play With Me and all those sorts of places, and I'm also a guitarist outside of the promoter job. So yeah, just involved in music in lots of different ways really.
Hi, I'm Nishla. I'm the programmer at the Howard Assembly Room at Opera North. So it's a venue, a really beautiful venue here in Leeds. It's about 350 seats, give or take, and we put on music, classical music, contemporary classical, folk, jazz, some pop and contemporary, and since I've been there, moving into some kind of more experimental stuff, dance. We just did like sort of basically a club night and yeah, looking at cross art stuff and theatre adjacent stuff as well. And I'm also a jazz singer, theatre maker, co-artistic director of a small theatre collective called Ulita that make cross-disciplinary work. And yeah, that's me.
Amazing. I really thought you were going to say Howard Assembly Rooms was 350 years old there, and I was like,
I don't know how old it is.
It looks old. It doesn't look that old.
It's definitely old.
So yeah, it sounds like we all have many hats, I think is the way to put it. And I don't know about you guys, but I definitely didn't get into events because I did an events degree, I did a music degree, I want to be a musician, and I found that through doing that, I really kind of got more of a buzz almost from the organising side of things than I did from being on the stage. So I kind of just wanted to ask you, like, what was your route into working in events, and like the why? What was the why moment where you were like, that is something that I want to do? Izzy, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So when I moved to Leeds for uni, I'm originally from Norfolk. Don't know if any Norfolk people are in here. Probably not. It's a very small place. Yeah. When I moved to uni, I met my best friend there, who is a drag queen and called Lambrini Von Dam. and we just got on so well, and I'd always wanted to put on an event, but I'd always been too scared to sort of do it on my own. And me and my friend were like, why don't we just try and put on a massive party with loads of drag queens and loads of disco acts and just make it as silly as humanly possible and charge, like, figure out the minimum that we can charge to break even and just do that. So we started out doing drag shows and just making them really silly. We got endorsed by Simply Pleasures, which is like the adult shop near Viaduct. They came on board and were like, we want to give you loads of free toys and everything. And we were like, fine, we'll do a raffle, why not? So we basically just fell into this really sort of like silly, fun event, and it ended up being really popular. We like always booked our wharf and it always hit capacity, and we just charged people £3 on the door, just tried to keep it as cheap as humanly possible, and just made most of our money through doing like raffles and just extra stuff like that. And yeah, we just did that, and we were like, oh, actually, people seem to really enjoy this. So it kind of just catapulted from there for doing more events. And then I started Girls Can Play Guitar a few years later, because I was like, I'd love to do drag events, but I'd also like to do some non-drag events too. And yeah, it just started out with us just wanting to do a massive party, just have all our friends and just have a nice time, and we actually really enjoyed it, and people seem to enjoy it. So yeah, it's catapulted from there really.
Amazing. I mean, that's the best way of getting in, I think. It's having an idea, doing it for the right reasons, and I think that's a really good example as well of like anyone can just kind of, if you want to do it, you can just do it. You can just book a venue and make something happen, like, because why not? Nishla, I imagine your route in has been quite, well, I mean, similar in some ways, but also quite different, because it's quite recently, really, that you started working more so in the events world.
Yeah, I'm trying to kind of figure out what the narrative of it is, because it doesn't, I mean, that's such an amazing story. I definitely come from more from like the music side of things, and I had been performing for a lot of time and getting more and more into kind of collaboration and making things across genres and with different artists, and I sort of became so interested in this alchemy of like what can happen when we really try to tell stories, like, I guess, across different art forms and different artists get to interact. So it really started with collaboration for me, and then that sort of morphed into curation. So I did a few projects as an artist where I asked artists to respond to my work and to each other's work, and then kind of pull together an exhibition or like kind of events with like different kind of strands. But at that point it was still very much about like being on the stage side, and then yeah, I guess I've been doing more and more of that, and then I kind of made like kind of an unorthodox leap, I guess, into programming. I had worked with Opera North before as an artist, and so when the programming job came up, I knew that it was an organisation I'd love to work for, and that it would be building on the skills I'd kind of been developing on the artist side of things. And so I guess I kind of approach my job as a programmer with that sort of curatorial idea, like trying to imagine what the experience is going to be, what this artist could do in collaboration with this artist, or if we kind of create this night. I tend to have like quite a holistic sense of what the event will be. So if you're putting on a gig, what does it sound like when you walk into the room, or what's the setup, or how are people sat, like how is it going to feel, basically. So that's kind of where I'm coming from when I'm making things.
I think that's, sorry, I've got a real frog in my throat. I think that's such a nice way of coming into it as well, like coming at it from a perspective of someone who's been on the stage and really wanting to create something that is an experience. It isn't just like like copy and paste this show into insert venue here and people will come and they'll have a fine time, I guess, you know. And that's obviously, there's a place for that as well, but I think it's really nice that you've been able to take that part of your journey and now bring it to an organisation where you're programming.
I think, yeah, in some ways I feel like Opera North is kind of unique like that, in that there is that space, and part of that is being a funded organisation, which is obviously a massive privilege, because it means the artistic thing that happens and the experience of the audience is allowed to be central, because there's less pressure to there's still obviously pressure and increasingly more and more pressure to make money from the events, but it is a very lucky position to be in, to be able to centre that artistic experience. And I think the Howard Assembly Room is such a special venue, and if you haven't been there, please come to something, because there's so much on and there'll definitely be something you like. But it's a beautiful space, so when you walk into it, you can't help but be like, oh, we could do something so amazing in here, like we could do this lighting, or we could create this sort of feeling, or seat people in this way that they could have a view of this beautiful element of it, or like, you know, feel this way. So I think the space really lends itself to that approach.
Great. And then Chris, I suppose for you, with Hyde Park Folk Club being your thing, it's quite linked to one specific place also. And your journey in is also an artist journey, right?
Yeah, to be completely honest, I think the first time I put events on was because I wanted to give myself a good gig. I would give myself a gig in general, and then I realised people were coming down, and I thought it's probably time for me to just step back and stop giving myself so many gigs, and allow other people to play. So yeah, that's really the main reason, and I realised there was an appetite for it. I started with a festival, the first ever thing that I did. I did it £6 in, and I sold my first one out at the book club. It's not that big, like 150, but still, it's nice. And then just splitting the money amongst everyone as well, which was really nice. And it became a thing that I did every single year, and then I started doing monthly shows. But yeah, just to give myself a gig, really. I think that's the main thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's super organic, that really, isn't it? I mean, this is probably a good time to ask, but who in this room has, in some capacity, been involved in putting on their own events or working at events? Hands higher, please. Okay, so quite a few of you, and I imagine for a lot of you it's probably been the same thing. It's probably been like, I want a gig, or there isn't this exact thing that I want to see going on. And do you guys kind of have any advice from like your journeys that you think could be helpful for people who haven't done that before but are interested in, or for people who are at the beginning stages and might need some help?
Yeah, it's so simple. You just need to find a venue, and then ask them if you can put a night on, and then that's it. That's your trick done. And then get some people to come down and play. Try and sell some tickets to pay for your room, and then it's as simple as that, really. Just go from there. But you've got to be passionate about it. That's the main thing. And there's ups and downs, obviously, but it will grow if you keep at it. And people want to be involved. Everyone here wants to be involved in some sort of way, don't they? So, yeah, just go for it. That's the main thing. The first step is the hardest. Just doing it.
Yeah, and you learn on the job. Like, that's the thing. Like, I don't think I actually have any hard skills at all, but someone's like, design me a brochure, and I'm like, okay. And then you just do it, you know, and you just learn. That's the best way. You've been nodding a lot. I feel like you got something to add here.
I agree with everything you said. I think when I speak to promoters, one thing that a lot of people are really nervous about, especially for their first gig, is paying the artists. Because obviously, you know, we see like the MU, like rightly so, saying artists should be paid this much, and I totally agree with that. But also I think the best thing when you're talking to artists is transparency. So, you know, if you're putting on your first event, go to your friends who are artists and just be really transparent with them. If you can't afford to pay them sort of the MU rate because it's your first event, just say, look, I want to put this night on. I appreciate that this is not going to be, you know, amazing pay for you, but I promise to like split all the ticket fees, or I promise to, you know, do this and make this a really good experience for you. You'll be surprised at how happy people are to help others out if you treat them with respect and you're honest about the fact that you might not be able to pay them loads because it's your first gig. You know, people, special needs, want to be involved with the local scene. So maybe try targeting bands who are looking for more gig experience, or, you know, bands who...
Chris?
Yeah. Yeah, targeting people who don't mind so much about that because they want to help you out and they want that experience.
Yeah, I think building on that, there's, as an artist and in the jazz world specifically, I think the network of regional jazz promoters who are putting on gigs for the love of it is so fundamental to getting started as a musician. And like a lot of these times you're playing like the back room of a pub, or like some weird little space that someone's found in their town, and the person who's put on the gig is not getting paid and is working really, really hard to build up an audience. And I know there are a lot of jazz promoters who have such goodwill towards them. Jez comes to mind at the Lescar in Sheffield, but you know there are hundreds all over the country who just love the music and want to create that experience in their community and want to give like emerging bands a place to play. But yeah, and then I think the other side of that is, I guess, once you get going with putting on events, there are always like funding pots and things that you can apply to help top up the fees you're able to offer. And I know, for example, NQ Jazz in Manchester, which is like a really important night that puts on kind of most of the like touring original jazz. They started off with this kind of model of putting on their friends and putting on local bands, and then as they grew, they started applying for more pots of funding and kind of being able to offer better rates. And as the night built up its reputation and people started coming and buying tickets, they were able to kind of get ahead a bit more so they could know how much they could offer. And yeah, but I think you're right, transparency is a major part of it.
Yeah, definitely. And like, I think people can tell whenever you're a genuine person. And I think because I've like more recently come across a lot of promoters who are coming at it from a huge organization, money driven commercial angle, and there's like, you know, a lot of great stuff is also in that world. I don't know as much about it, but I find that like I go in there and I'm like, hello, it's just me coming to put on some music. And like having that approach even in those environments, and like coming up the way that like I have, and like it being so much more about I want this ticket to be £3 and I want everyone to have a good time. I think having that approach in that setting like keeps the soul there, because otherwise it could just feel like working in any big industry. You could just be working in any commercial industry, and that's not why I think we all get into doing it in a way. This kind of leads me on to, and we've already touched on it, but what are for you all the marker of what makes an event successful? Like, everyone's going to have a different metric of what this is, and I'm curious to know what yours are.
Big profits, that's my thing. People coming down and having a good time, that's probably the main thing, isn't it? And booking people that you want to listen to, and you get a free gig.
Yeah, I definitely think, I know it sounds really cliche, like, I want everyone to have a lovely time and that's the most important thing. But I do think that actually, for me, the most important thing, because, you know, if you put on an event, obviously, hopefully you make profit and hopefully you make it, at the very least, break even. But there's always that risk, no matter how high of a promoter you are, no matter how big gigs you're putting on, there is the risk that you won't make that money back. So I think as long as you're sort of sensible with those decisions in the first place and kind of true to where you are at now and how much you can put into it, I think that the most important thing is that the artists feel respected and comfortable, because, you know, for the artists we have in this room, I'm sure you've done a gig where you've just thought, oh my god, there's no money in the world that could have prepared me for that one. So I think, yeah, as long as like the artists feel really comfortable and they feel like it's been a good gig and the audience have had a good time and they've come away from it, it's been a memorable experience for them, I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, we both said it, but I think for me it's like that magic in the room when people who love a thing are getting to experience that thing they love. And also, building on what you said about the artists, I think, as an artist I've had lots of experiences where I've been able to do my best work because of the environment I've walked into, and also a lot of experiences where I felt like I couldn't do what I wanted to do for that audience because I wasn't treated in the right way leading up to it, or I didn't have a quiet space to just have a moment and gather my thoughts before I went on stage, or I didn't have, you know, the best sound that venue could offer me because, you know, a sound person didn't take my request seriously. So now when I'm putting on events, I'm very conscious of that. Like, I want the artist to have an experience that means that when they get on stage, they can do the thing that they can do in the best way. And then I think, yeah, then that translates to that experience for the audience being as amazing as it can be.
Yeah, 100%. I think, like, I'm so glad, by the way, that other than your joking response, no one was like, money. I think holding that space, because that is what we're all there for. Like, for me, the reason I love events, and actually the reason that I love putting them on, sometimes even more than I enjoy going to them, is watching the community happen right there in front of you. Watching people, like, the way that they look at each other and, like, like just pure elation whenever something beautiful happens and they can't believe they're experiencing it, or whenever some artist articulates something and you're like, that's what I've been feeling and I haven't been able to put a finger on it, and now I'm feeling it in this room with a bunch of like-minded people who are all completely on board. Like, it really is art first, and I think that is why treating the artist well is so important. And it's so often overlooked. Like, I work with so many producers and just like teams who are so like, oh, I don't care if it was in their writer, like I don't want to give them that. And it's like, that's literally why we're here. It's so important to like listen to and respect what those people are asking for, because that is why this entire thing is happening. Like, there's no show without the people going on the stage, whatever it is that they're doing. So it's really important that, like, and it's not a diva thing, although there are plenty of divas out there as well, and that's great. That is fine. You bring your oyster shucker with you. But, like, you know, I think it's really paramount. And it can make or break an event. Like, a bad event is one where the artist is pissed off. And it's just, like, it's not pleasant for anyone. And we've kind of touched a little bit on some of the barriers that there are to events. And I don't want to I don't want to lean on that too heavily, because that's not why we're here. But what I want to talk about is whenever you have encountered an issue, because there always are, like that last 10 minutes before doors open, there's always something. I'm sure there was something today, I don't know what it is, but I'm sure there was something. What do you think helps you in those moments where you encounter a roadblock in the lead up to an event, or something goes wrong on the night? Is there like some sort of resilience tool you have, or is it a team member, or is it a learning or a skill?
Can I go? I've done so many DIY events, and I always find myself like up a ladder doing some crazy thing. A couple of years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, at Lancaster Jazz Festival, we were putting on this piece of theatre which had toured a bit, and we were old hands at doing it, and we knew that the space we were in was a theatre space, so everything will be fine. And then when we got in there, the projector, it's very specific projection mapping has to hit the whole set. It's really intrinsic to the show, and the way the projector was rigged, it was just not possible to hit the bottom of the set. And the only solution was to like raise the set, and there was rigging, so it was like the day of, we're at B&Q buying chains and like metal, and then I was like standing on top of a table, and you know, like we're trying to get the set up, and like we got it hung, and then we got the thing projection mapped, and then because we didn't have proper tech support, it was a whole thing. Eventually, when we later found out that the rigging that the projector was on was movable, but never, don't worry about that, it looked great. But yeah, I think, and I've been in that situation so many times, but I think a big part of it is the ability to pivot. Like, don't panic, something's gonna happen. You know, and like, you're always working towards like the next best solution. And I think, I don't really consider myself like a particularly organized, planny kind of person, but I think I do have that ability to like, in the moment, just get into this like weird, cold, calm space and be like, how are we going to solve this? And I think that is so important. When you're putting on live events, like not to try to be unflappable, to try to move to the next step, and keep calm with the people around you, and keep respect among the team, and use everyone's skills to kind of get the thing to happen. But then there are always times when like you make a mistake, and sometimes we get feedback at How to Assembly Room, and I think, oh God, why didn't I think of that thing? And it's always really disappointing to know that someone didn't have the experience they hoped to have, and it could have been prevented. But I think like a huge part of that is just to like listen and think about it, and like and learn, and ask people for help with people who have more knowledge than you on a certain thing, whether it's like accessibility or I don't know, tech or whatever it is, to find those people who have more knowledge than you, and keep learning and keep trying to do better.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, that sounds like a very complicated predicament to get into. I think, kind of piggybacking off what you said, I suppose I always think of it as it's knowing when to be anxious, because like I think a lot of, you know, us in this room can kind of, we probably all have the sort of shared anxiety of anything performance-based, because, you know, it's a high-pressured environment, whether you're the performer or the promoter. And I think for me, I've got to the point where I've realised my sort of like, oh my god, what if this happens? What if that happens? That's a really useful thing to have when I'm planning an event. It means that I think about like, oh my god, this really rare, super unlikely thing could happen. And, you know, it sort of prepared me to mitigate against it. I mean, obviously you can't mitigate against everything, but it's knowing when there is the time to be like, oh my god, what if this happens? And knowing that when it comes to the event and you've got it planned and you've done your best, turning that part of your brain off and going, okay, the most important thing is that the event runs. And, you know, hopefully nothing will go wrong and it'll be great. But there'll be times where things do go wrong. But the most important thing is that the event actually runs. And if you have that and things go wrong, ultimately it's not a big deal. You know, you can learn from it. And like you said, I think if you can be calm and kind of go, okay, this has happened, how are we going to get around it? It's knowing when to turn off that kind of like panic.
Yeah.
And when it comes to an event, you just have to turn off that panic because it just does not help.
Being completely real, I would say the biggest worry is probably losing money on an event, especially when you're doing it yourself. Because I book people, I put like 300 quid forward to book an act, then you're going to pay a sound engineer, which adds like another 100 quid, and you got PRS. Sorry, it's very boring to hear this, but like that's the real life situation when you're putting on your own shows. And then it turns out you've sold 10 tickets like on the day of the show, and you're like, right, I'm down 400 quid here, and you pay your sparks as well, like, and that all starts adding up. So that's like the worst possible situation you can think of, in my opinion. But the more you carry on, the more you learn that, you know, you have your good shows that help you fund those nights, and you've got to be smart about it, I think, and put some money aside and make a pot. And you book certain acts that you know are going to bring some money in, and then that allows you to support smaller acts. So it's just about keeping it balanced, I think. And when that does happen, yeah, like just run the show and then get ready for next month. You've got to take it in your stride and keep going.
I think that's such a good point about having a balanced program, and like I think it's very easy externally. Like I've definitely looked at programs before and gone, why have they booked that person? And then it's like, oh, because now they've got these 5 shows which are wicked, but they probably are going to actively lose money on, and like that is completely fine as long as overall it isn't like a consistently repeating cycle, and then it's you that is bearing the brunt of it. Because unless you're fine with that, but I don't really think anyone is actually fine with that. But I think, you know, I think money is a really real thing in the organisation of events. Like, they can get very expensive, but they can also be very DIY. It just really depends what kind of event it is that you're trying to create. If you're trying to create something that is for a super high-end audience, like I've worked on events with a private bank, and they're like, you didn't turn the lights down at exactly 6:05. And I'm like, yeah, it's fine, the event still ran, but that's their standard, and that is a high-budget thing. And then, but you can also run your own event where you bring all your house lamps there and you do it yourself. And I think it's about realising like what it is that you want to get out of your event and the atmosphere that you're trying to create, and you can scale your budget accordingly to it.
Yeah, like what is a successful event to you? To me, it's like booking a touring act, so that involves putting more money on the line. I've got to have a sound engineer, and I need to get people down. But if you just want to have a play with your friends and like you want it to be a recurring thing, like you can do that whenever you want. You can go book the Snug at the book club, it's free, just go and play that. If you want to book small acts, you don't have to put much money on the line. It's just whatever you want out of it. You don't have to put loads of money on the line.
And actually, I think like talking about booking touring acts, it's just reminded me of something that you'd said really early on, which is about collaboration. So I think this is something that it's really important in the world of events and making them work well. Is like, if you want to bring an artist in and they're on a touring schedule, if you can link in with other like venues and cities, that's going to massively reduce the costs, because you're not like solely responsible for like international travel and visas and all these sorts of things. Or if you want to put an event on and you maybe like, so I think you do a lot of collaborating with Girls Can Play Guitar as well. You know, like join up with another group who are doing something kind of similar to you, split the costs, make it work. I think it's a really good point. And like working in partnership is difficult sometimes, but I think that's also where a lot of beauty comes in events, because again, you're just inviting more people into your space.
For sure. I mean, so there are like formalised kind of partnerships like the one Sirius has with Opera North, and you know where they share events and they share acts and things like that. But lately I've also just been chatting to like a bunch of other programmers and just like talking about like who they're interested in, like artists that they've seen that they're really excited by, that maybe they couldn't make, like you say, make it work with one gig, but if other promoters or other programmers were interested, then you know a tour could come together and it's more environmental as well. So I think that those communications are really open. And then the other side of that, I think, is like being creative with like double bills and multi-set events where like you have one artist who you know is going to draw more of a crowd in that scene, and then the other half of the double bill is someone who's more up and coming, but then hopefully these are two acts whose audiences might be interested in each other's music. So you're kind of getting enough people through the door to make the event successful by this particular combination of people, and hopefully helping both the artists as well and introducing the audiences to new music. So yeah, I think those things can be really good as well.
At Leeds Jazz Festival, in case anyone doesn't know about it, it's happening this year from the 23rd to the 28th of May, little plug. But that is basically entirely done in partnership with venues and promoters and organisations around the city, anyone who wants to get involved. And like, I think there's so much strength in that model. Like, it's, I mean, we're in a lucky position where we're not trying to make money as the festival. It's about everyone else, it's not about us. But like, there's so much strength in that. And even just talking to other people, like just seeing like what they're up to, what they're listening to, what it's about. It's about the art, again, it just keeps circling back to that. So I think like we have a lot of programming experience primarily here, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the other roles that are really like essential in pulling together an event. Obviously, if you're running your own events, you're often the person selling the merch and on the door and doing artist liaison and show managing and have booked it and did everything. But can you tell me a little bit about like building a team around you, or like the essential other people that are part of that process?
Yeah, you want a good designer. That's number one. I think, yeah. I mean, running an event in itself is only 10% of the game. 90% is promoting it and trying to get people to come down. So you get to do your research. Then again, it depends like why you're running your event. But for me personally, it's like I need to know how many tickets this person's going to sell, because at this point I'm 5 years into doing it, and I want to make some money from doing it. I don't just want to keep doing it and losing money. So I've got to figure out how many people are going to come down for that act. How many people is a support act going to bring? Like, how do you work ticket splits? I don't know if people want to talk about stuff like that. And how do you spread the financing throughout everyone? Yeah. What was the question again? I've got on my own tangent.
No, it was good. It was... yes, team.
I just do it on my own, yeah. Yeah, but a good designer, that's like your number one. Having friends as well, making friends with venues where you can put your posters up. Just being relentless online. At first it might just be you're asking your friends to come down, and then slowly people start to see that this thing's going on, putting flyers up. Like for me personally, having a folk club where young people come, because it's mostly young people that come, which is traditional, like very old people go to folk clubs. Yeah, it's really important to put the flyers in the right place and people see that for that reason, or like going on radio or whatever you can do to spread the word. That's most of the game, trying to get people down there.
I think that's a really good point actually about the marketing of stuff. It's not really something that we've talked about a lot, but it's like, you know, having the idea is one thing, but if you don't tell anyone about it, then no one can really come. And radio is a really good one actually. Like BBC Radio Leeds are like pretty much always happy for people to come on and have to talk about things, and that's free. You know, you can just go and do it for free. And in terms of like at your events, who else is going to be there?
Sound engineer. Sometimes you get someone to pay someone to run the door, but your sound engineer is like the number one person for me. And then I do everything else myself. So I just run the door myself, plug the event. Put the chairs out if it's seated. I mean, it's really simple, to be honest. I think.
It's simple now because you know it, though. To people who don't know, you know.
Yeah, it was a bit scary at first and full on, especially when I used to play them. That was really too much. But I'm just a one-person operation, so for me it's quite simple. But I can imagine like working at hard assembly rooms, you've got a lot more pressure and people above you.
So we're probably at the other end of that in terms of putting on events. So we have, Rachel, who's sitting there, is projects coordinator. Yeah. So so the process for us is like, I would find the artist and negotiate the deal with them. And I don't know if we want to touch a little bit on like things like box office splits and stuff like that, but just to give you a really brief overview, there are different models in an organizational setting of how people get paid. So one option, and it's kind of often the case in the classical world, is that just a fee is negotiated, and that fee is guaranteed to the artist. Often in like pop and jazz, you might have a guaranteed fee versus a box office split. So that just means once all the tickets are sold, the costs are taken out, and then whatever's left is split between the venue and the artist. And I think like quite a common split is 70-30, 70 to the artist, 30 to the venue. But then there are different percentage splits depending on what the situation is. Ours is usually 80-20 to the artist. So that just means your risk is a bit lower, and the artist's opportunity is a bit higher, and it also means like everyone's equally invested in making sure the event does well, which is kind of nice as well. So anyway, whatever that process is, I would do that, and then someone like Rachel, and there's another person in our team called Darcy, would do what we call advancing. So that's talking to the artist in the lead up to the event, and making sure they know where they're going to go, and there's a plan for the day, like what time to sound check, what time they'll arrive, what time they'll be sound checked, what time they'll have a break, what time they'll be on stage, all that kind of information. We have a technical team at the Howard Assembly Room, so at some point I would get the tech spec from the artist, which is basically just a document that explains what they need to do the show. So that might be if they have any backline requirements, they need certain musical instruments or amps hired in, or if they have preferences for their lighting or their sound, they would send that over, and I would pass that on to the technical team, who would then liaise directly with the artist or their management potentially to work out more about how the show's going to kind of look and sound. And then on the day, you have a stage management person or an artist liaison who will greet the artist, be with them through the event, kind of take care of them in the case of any emergency, and just sort of be around. And then we have a box office, so kind of people who are selling the tickets and on the door when people come in, and then a front of house team, so like you'd have in any theatre or venue, people who kind of run the bar and show people to their seats and usher and all those things, and take care of people, of the audience, over the course of the night. So it's quite a big team, and everyone has to kind of work together and communicate, and that was sort of like a bit eye-opening for me, because I'd come from like a very DIY scene, so walking into this massive team. Oh, and I didn't even talk about marketing. There's a marketing team, and so it's really important to kind of keep lots of lines of communication open with different people. And I think in a programming role, you're kind of the linchpin of all those people, because you're the one who's kind of brought the artist into the organisation, and then it's kind of your responsibility to make sure that all the information that needs to get disseminated and shared does, and that people are looped in. So yeah, that's kind of the large scale end of things.
That was a really great explanation of all of that. And also my new role is literally being the person who's like, artist booked, here's everyone's information. And in a way you'd think that's like easier than having to do it all yourself, but it's actually really hard, because you're like, oh, they didn't send the text spec, or like, where did that thing go, or did they sign that contract, or was I meant to make the contract? And but it's like, yeah, that was a really great overview of how it all works. Were you gonna add something there, Izzy?
Yeah, I'll add something. I mean, you both have like shared such like amazing experiences there. So mine's definitely not as detailed as yours. But yeah, with DIY events, I think what you said about getting a designer is so true. Like, honestly, getting a good designer at the initial step, who can give you like a good logo, a good like branding palette, just means that when you are sort of creating your own posts, if you've got that template that has been designed by, you know, a graphic designer, it just makes your life like a million times easier, because you haven't had to come up with that. I don't really tend to work in team, because I'm a bit of a control freak when it comes to my own events, so I tend to just do it all, which is something I'm working on. But I think, yeah, the most important thing is that communication. So, for example, with sound engineers, it's little things like, I'll always send tech specs to a sound engineer personally, because a lot of venues won't actually give the sound engineer the tech specs until like they've turned up to work. And if you've got a band that's quite a complicated setup, they're going to need to look at that, you know, the night before. They're going to need to have time to process that. Things as well, like getting together a really, really good gig advance to send out to everyone, because as an artist, I hate being told what time loading is on the day. Like, I find it so stressful. So it's sort of communicating with everyone in advance, and just little things you wouldn't think of, like, has anyone got allergies? Things like that, you know. We had one show once where one of the artists had a really, really severe tree nut allergy, and the place we had the gig had a restaurant, like, in the venue, and a lot of their food was vegan and had, like, tree nuts in it. So it's things like that. It's being able to sort of, like, get all the communication as much before the event as you possibly can to mitigate those things. In my day job, so I coordinate all the events for Leeds Conservatoire Students' Union, which we're quite a small students' union, so it's not really as hefty as it sounds, but that's when your sort of, you know, working within a team comes in. You know, if I put on an event for Students' Union, that's completely different to DIY. I'll then have to be talking to the bar and making sure that they've got people and they're staffed and they're open to the time that we need them to be open to. You know, talking to security, making sure the building's open to the right time, making sure that there's, you know, stewards involved, making sure there's people to work on the door, making sure, you know, box office is open. And kind of similar to you, like, coming from DIY to then having, like, oh my god, I have to tell all these people everything about this event ever. Yeah, it's great. It's, like, definitely tests your communication. But, yeah, I wouldn't have been able to make that jump if I hadn't started out with basically making the mistakes because I was the only one doing it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, like, that's where preparation does come in a way. Like, it's quite a common thread throughout, like, creating a successful event. Like, be prepared. Like, you don't have to have a plan for your preparation, but have the documents that you need, have the information that you need, know the contacts that you need to know. I had a question and it's just completely gone out of my brain. Yeah, I think that is, it's gone.
On the documents thing, I think that's something, like, if, you know, that I've learned from working at Opera North. If I went back into DIY events, I would definitely take with me is, like, having some good, like, form documents that you send out that can just gather all the information you need. And like you said about, like, allergies, but, you know, another one that's on ours is about accessibility requirements and things like that, and getting that information as early as you can. Even just, like, so simple things like what instruments will you be bringing in, who's coming with you, and what do you need in terms of if we're providing, like, hotels and things like that, like, getting all that information on paper. I think it's not something I would have done naturally, but I've sort of learnt from being in an organisation that those type of kind of form documents can actually be so useful down the track, especially if you're then working in a team and you need to share that information with other people.
Yeah. Okay, amazing. I wanted to ask if any of you guys, because we've talked primarily, and I'm not sure if anyone here is interested in talking about festivals at all. Is anyone interested in talking about festival events? Have any of you guys got some? Yeah, that was a lovely lull. Have you guys worked much at festivals at all? Yeah? Do you want to share some festival experience with us?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is the festival that I run, which is the High Park Folk Festival. And that's where I make all my money to then sort of, like, survive for a year, and then the festival comes around again and I'm laughing again, momentarily. But what do you want to know about it?
I suppose how it's different to running a standalone gig, and why?
I find it much easier to promote, actually. Just because it's like an all-day thing. People like to be out in the summer and come down and be there all day and be with the friends and listen to some music. It just sells out every time. I don't know, really. It just seems to do the trick. I find that much easier to promote than single one-off nights. Because I think having a lineup of 8 acts is so much more enticing rather than having just the one, because it's me. Yes. But anyway, that's all I've got to say. There you go.
Yeah. Any festival experience?
Not to the same extent that obviously, you know, you do with the jazz festival. I've done a couple of, like, all-day lineups, so kind of festivals, but one stage, that sort of deal. And I think a lot of the same skills from, you know, bog standard gigs is there. I think the only difference is I think the venue makes so, like, much bigger difference, because you have to then think about, you know, are there places nearby for people to get food? Because between artists, they're going to need to go and get food, and, you know, is it a convenient place? Is it near to good transport links? Like, all these sort of things that, if you're doing an evening gig, you're probably not going to think as much about, necessarily. I think the main thing would just be scheduling. I think with a festival, it's really good to, like, allow enough time for things to go wrong, basically. You know, if a band, you know, have a technical error, with a festival, if one band's late, it pushes the whole thing back. So it's sort of about allowing yourself more time for things to go wrong. At least that's what I found. I don't know what, you know, your experiences on that is, but it's sort of, if something goes wrong, it pushes the whole day back. So just kind of mitigating that risk a little bit more.
What about you, Ash? Because you've probably got the most festival experience, yeah.
I think what you were just saying is very true. I think in general at festivals, whether they're city venue based ones or they're greenfield ones, so like in a faraway location, the stakes are just higher in every possible way, because transport is so much more of an issue, especially for greenfield festivals. Like, you physically have to get somewhere. You are basically running a mini city where everything has to function the same way it does in modern society. You have to have security, you have to have, like, I didn't know that, like, operations teams were a thing, and that's like traffic management, water management, waste management. Like, it is like running an actual city alongside running a gig all at once. And I mean, I think for me, festivals are like my absolute favourite place to be, because it's chaos and it's brilliantly last minute all pulled together sort of chaos, but it's a completely different kind of skill set, because you're also battling a lot more elements. Like, you might be sleeping in a tent that is leaking on you, and you're getting 3 hours sleep a night and working the rest of the 21 hours a day, and you're getting paid like 80 quid for that entire day, but it's worth it for some weird reason. I think for anyone that is interested in learning more about events, festivals are a really great place to do it, because it's like learning a language. The best way of learning it is being fully immersed in it. And in a festival, you are fully immersed. You see the full range of roles. It's so much more than in a venue, because you're running the entire thing by yourself. It's incredibly well staffed. Like, from some of the most important people in a festival site are the people you've never seen or heard of, like the caterers that are catering for the artists and the staff, or the campsite managers, the zone managers. And I think a lot of people love festivals, a lot of people hate them as well, but it's a really great place to get experience if anyone is looking for more events work. Like, the way I got into events was just volunteering at some festivals, and then there's always work there. So if anyone is looking to get more events experience, like, festivals are a great way. The likelihood is you won't be in a programming role, at least initially, although anyone that I have met that programs festivals definitely started as like an artist liaison or a stage manager. So I would really recommend it to anyone who is curious about knowing more. And
we met as artist liaison volunteers at Manchester Jazz Festival in
2018. Yeah, yonks ago. Ages and ages ago, and now we're still working together, but you're at our assembly and I'm at Sirius, so wow, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, we grew up. I kind of wanted to, before we go to some questions, I wanted an anecdote of an unsuccessful event that you have been part of, and why.
Oh my god, where to start? To be fair, I actually haven't had anything like massively horrifically scar me for life go wrong, which is good. One of the early events that me and my friend Joe did, one of the drag events, we went to a venue and the sound engineer didn't turn up. And this was like back in the early days when we were like, oh my god, what do we do? So it got to the point, the sound engineer eventually turned up. We had like a 9-piece like brass band playing, was one of the the band. So we needed a sound engineer. So we kind of set up everything that we could, but then we got to a point where it got to like when the doors were meant to be open, that's when the sound engineer turned up. So we kind of just had to, I basically just pushed my friend Joe, Lambrini Von Dam, the drag queen, I just basically pushed him into the bar area and we were like, we will just entertain the crowd in the bar. So he ended up doing like this massive lip sync thing in the bar, and we ended up having like the majority of the show, like the drag part of the show in there, and then the music in the actual venue, which I'm sure there was a lot of there were some like middle-aged blokes there who I'm sure found it incredibly weird. But it actually like got more people down because people who were just going there after work for a quiet drink were suddenly doing shots off like really weird things and like being like, why is this 7-foot drag queen talking to us? So it actually ended up working quite well. But then when the sound engineer turned up, I was absolutely fuming. I thought, unless something's happened, like his hamster's died or something, you know, or his car's broken down. And he literally turned up. What, sorry?
More reasonable.
Yeah, more reasonable, yeah. He literally turned up and was like, oh, sorry mate, I was playing Fortnite and lost track of time. Yeah, so that was pretty stressful. But, you know, it ended up working in the end.
A great example of a pivot is exactly what we were talking about earlier. Don't panic, turn it into a good thing, you know? And Nishla?
I'm not going to throw Howard Assembly Room under the bus. So,
Just did.
I went to Edinburgh Festival this past year, 2023. Literally everything that could go wrong went wrong, to the point where I was like, are we cursed? Car broke down on the way up there, got into tech, and I don't know if anyone's done Edinburgh Festival or been to Edinburgh Festival, but the whole thing is, there's so many events, things go on a really tight turnaround. You generally have a 15-minute get-in, which get-in is what we call from the point where the artists arrive at the venue. And usually, like, it's nice to have a few hours, or, you know, for a theatre production, maybe a week. But we had 15 minutes every day from the time we could arrive to the time the show would have to go on. It has set pieces and projection and all sorts. So we got into our tech, which you have at 6 a.m. because there are shows all day in the venues. And they had misread the tech spec, and there was no piano in the space. And it's a musical show that rests completely on an acoustic piano being in the show. And the tech person was like, don't worry, there's a piano somewhere in this building. We'll figure it out. So our pianist Tom went off looking in this like old theatre and eventually found this piano, but backstage behind one of the... behind a curtain thing, and it was so busted. It was like you'd play one note and like 7 notes would play, and it was wild. It had broken wheels, and there were 4 steps between it and the space we needed it to be in. And meanwhile, back in the room, the projector's like not working right, keeps turning itself off, and tech person doesn't really know like how to stop the mic feeding back because the room's so small, because Edinburgh's like so many fan spaces that like the speakers that are pointing at each other. So yeah, and then the owner of the venue came in and was like, "Oh, I'm really sorry about the piano thing. We're just gonna have to hire an electric piano." And we were just like, "We can't," because the show like rests on this acoustic sound. It's really, really important to the show, and it's something when we were looking for a venue, the 2 things we said were it has to have an acoustic piano and it has to be wheelchair accessible. And so we'd chosen this space based on those reasons. So we put our foot down and sort of said, you've got to get a piano tuner in, let's see what we can do with this piano. And they did that, to their credit. And then me and the artist, visual artist, drove to B&Q after the tech, got a bunch of dollies, came back, got like 6 guys to pick up the piano and put it on the dollies so we'd be able to wheel it. Found a route like through the catering kitchen and like around a corner that was like step-free. And we actually found a little corner in the room and we're like, please, can we just leave the piano here so we don't have to do this journey every day in the 15-minute get-in. Yeah, it kind of worked. Like by the end of the run, because it was a 2-week run, the piano was pretty wild again, tuning-wise. But yeah, we made it work. But it was one of those things where like, oh yeah, so then, sorry, one other thing happened. Because we couldn't get the projector quite right, we weren't hitting the top of the set, and the visual artist was like, I can't have, like the Guardian were coming to review it, but like, can't have the Guardian coming and seeing, you know, this much of the set not being hit by the projection. She was like, we'll have to take it out the back and chop the top off the set. So I had a toolbox with me, so we were like, cool, we'll do that. So me and her, hysterical, had no sleep, in the back courtyard, like trying to chop the top of this thing. We didn't have a table or anything, so I'm just holding it and she's soaring. And then we needed something to stabilize the top, so we're like, oh, the piece of wood, we'll use that. And I was like, we can super glue it. I brought super glue. Cut to 5 minutes later, all my fingers were glued together. We couldn't attach the set piece. I was like so sleep deprived that I just laid down and cried on the floor with all my fingers glued together. And then eventually someone from the venue gave us some nail polish remover. I soaked my hands for an hour, I became free. And, you know, everything kind of worked out. But, yeah, I think, like, when we were in the midst of that, we were all just, like, we were like 3 zombies, just, like, trying to take the next step. And I think, at the time it was really traumatic, but now looking back at it, like, I'm quite proud of us because, like, so many obstacles came up and we stayed friends, and that's the main thing. We, like, we stayed kind, and the show went on, and hopefully the audience did not know how close to a breakdown we all were.
Moral of the story there, read the text back. Remember earlier we were like, get your documents in order and like actually send them to people and read them. That will happen if you don't. Chris?
I feel really bad. I don't think anything bad has ever happened to me. You know, maybe a PA's gone off, but you know, it's folk. It's like really wholesome. You can just play without that. So it's, I know, nothing. It's really calm and nothing really happens.
Alright, so everyone get into folk then. I think for me, I'm not going to talk about whenever I've messed up on a professional level. I'm just going to talk about a personal level, and that was, you were there. You know what I'm going to say. I was at Blue Dot Festival last summer. I didn't look at the weather forecast before going, and I was artist liaison. It was so wet that mud was coming up to the top of my wellies that I didn't have socks underneath, so my legs were there's scars on my legs from my wellies. On day 1, I lost my glasses. I hadn't brought any contact lenses, so I was wearing my sunglasses for the next 2 days, and people were coming up to me and they were like, is this just your vibe? And I was like, no. Meanwhile, it's so wet that like the artists I'm working with can't perform. There was a lot of stilt walkers and fire breathers and lots of things that you can't do whenever it's rain and mud up to your knees that I couldn't actually see, I could just feel. And then that night, one of my artists got cancelled and my boss was like, look, just go chill. Just go watch some music. And I was like, okay. And I lost my sunglasses. And I spent the entire last day and a half, including a train then from the festival to Manchester to Leeds, blind and sad, and it was awful. It was really bad. I was not watching Grace Jones, I was listening to Grace Jones, and everyone around me was having a great time. And I think, yeah, just be prepared. Look at the weather forecast. I have since bought really good waterproofs and really long socks and contact lenses. Yeah, just be prepared. It'll save you a lot of pain, literally. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah, go on. I'm not sure we've got a mic, so you might just have to enunciate. Oh, we do have a mic.
Thank you very much. Hi, my name's Mari. I've done a little bit of like eventy stuff before coming to uni, and there's been a bit of sometimes looking at more affordable packages, or with the theatre, trying to get foster children interested in the theatre so they can come. With the Derbyshire Constabulary, like putting on events to increase the relationship between the police and young black people. So I was just wondering, like, for you guys personally, what sort of efforts typically do you feel like you have to put in place to make sure you reach out to like minority groups and disadvantaged groups so they can still, you know, enjoy a nice successful event?
That's such a good question. I mean, all those events sound so interesting. I'd love to hear more about them. Yeah, I think it's a really important area. I think personally, I think a lot about the people I'm putting on stage and trying to make sure I have lots of different groups represented. So I start with, when I'm programming, I use this thing called Miro. I don't know if anyone's used it, but basically I start with like breaking down the genres that I want to program, and then within that, making sure that I'm balancing how many female or gender minority lead artists I have, how many people of colour I'm putting on stage, whether I've got disabled artists on stage, all of these kind of things. And I actually like make little colourful sticky notes so I can kind of keep a track of what my season's looking like and how balanced it is. So I think a first and pretty major step is kind of who you're putting on stage, who you're platforming, and who you're how balanced that program is, and how people can feel that they're represented and that they're invited and they're included. But I think like it's quite hard in a venue like ours, which has had a tradition of being a classical music venue, and that looks a certain way, that you walk in and it has a feeling like it's for a certain thing, you know, and those things are really real. You walk in, you look at a space, and you maybe don't feel like it's for you. So this is like something I really want to change, to like kind of make this space feel like it's for lots of different kinds of people, and it's for all sorts of people from Leeds. And I think a big part of that, I mean, the part I have the most control over is the program, so trying to put on different genres, different music, starting different times. We have, we're lucky to have kind of like an education department and people who are actively looking at kind of creating more networks within the community. So we have something called community partnerships, where we work with like lots of different groups. I think it's about 140 different groups within the Leeds community. We invite those people in with free tickets or subsidised tickets, free bus tickets and things like that. We do an under 30s scheme where people can get a ticket to pretty much everything for £10. We try to make the venue as accessible as possible. It's fully kind of wheelchair accessible, and something that I've started since I've been working there is like trying to do more. We did our first audio describe thing at Christmas, and I want to kind of integrate that into the program and make that more of a standard offering. So all of these things, but I'm still like, you know, just the other day I got an email after we did this event called Sisters with Transistors. So basically we screened this film, Sisters with Transistors, which is an amazing documentary about pioneering female electronic music makers. And then we had 3 live sets, and one from a modular, all from female and gender minority musicians, a modular synth, and then 2 DJs. And I was feeling like quite proud of the event because it was something very different, and I had thought a lot about like making the artists like kind of people who maybe are kind of interesting and diverse and at the top of their game, and also from groups that might have traditionally been kind of overlooked in the music sector, and also getting a lot more young people into the venue and people who maybe don't feel classical music spaces are for them. But then afterwards we got an email about someone who had felt that the event wasn't as accessible for her as she would have liked, and immediately I felt so disappointed in myself for not clocking that and thinking about that ahead of time. And I think I just need to think more about it and like learn from that feedback and try to get ahead of it for next time. But I think a big part of it is being aware and thinking about it and listening when you make mistakes as well.
Do you mind if I just jump in quickly? I think as well, representation on stage and off stage is super important. Like behind the scenes roles are so often enough not like diverse enough, and there's loads of schemes actually at the moment for people to like learn the skills that people are like hiring for, and I think that's really good. Also, something that's really worth people looking at if you're putting on events is community tickets. You can actually really often get sponsorship from companies to then give free tickets to different people. You can choose a specific group, or you can kind of offer them out, and like having free activity, especially when you're a funded organisation, is so important, because then everyone can experience it, because it shouldn't be behind closed doors. It should be for everybody.
I'll jump in a little bit here as well. Your events sound fantastic, by the way. I know your question's probably more in context with what you do, but just to plug a little bit here. How I sort of do representation at my events is, one of my organisations is called Girls Can Play Guitar, and I think the whole brand of that, the point of Girls Can Play Guitar isn't to have a full female or non-binary lineup. The point of it is to kind of normalise when you go to an event, instead of having like the one token female singer in an otherwise completely male lineup, it's being able to see, oh cool, there's a female guitarist, cool, there's a non-binary drummer, like just sort of normalising, not just having, it's just a girls' night, you know. Obviously that's amazing, there's so many places in Leeds that do that, and they do it really well, so I kind of feel like that kind of part of the market's already, you know, it's already being done. But yeah, I think the representation is just to sort of, because I've built the brand based on kind of having a diverse lineup, like you were saying, on stage and off stage. You know, the graphic designers we get, the sound engineers, just sort of opening that up to everyone. I think I'm at a point now where I have people messaging all the time saying that, you know, it really resonates with them, which is really lovely. I'd like to delve a bit more into it, but I started doing some workshops in schools as well, which kind of matches what you were saying about sort of interacting with kids and trying to get them into that sort of thing. I think that, you know, with the music industry especially, it's so imperative to, you know, get it to people when they're young, whether that's, you know, them going to gigs or getting them involved in music. It has to happen when they're younger. Otherwise, you know, getting into that when you're older, trying to learn an instrument when you're older, trying to hone those skills, so much harder if you haven't kind of grown up knowing that that's an option to you.
Even going to gigs.
Yeah, totally, even going to gigs. So yeah, I think outreach work with young people is just so important. You know, schools is really a good place to kind of have those workshops.
I hope that we have vaguely touched on what you were hoping for. If not, come chat to us afterwards. I'd love to hear more about your events. Have we got time to take another question? One more question. Your hand was straight up at the back there. Go on.
Yo, you okay? Thank you for the wisdom so far. It's been amazing. My name's Raja, and along with my homie Augustine here, we're running a collective that's holding an event at the Vinyl Whistle in Headingley on the 5th of April. Please feel involved to come if you like hip-hop and you like music and you want to see a community grow. But my question for you was, if you were going to run an event where the genre didn't have that much exposure, like hip-hop does in Leeds, what would you consider when you were running the event as opposed to like a mainstream genre?
If it was me, I would look at adjacent interests. So, like, if you're into this genre, what else are you into? Probably going to be a crossover there. And just wide marketing. Do a guerrilla marketing campaign. Put stickers and posters everywhere. The visibility will get out there, and the people who are interested will see it.
Yep, I was just going to say that. Good design, get your poster everywhere, get people down. There you go.
You love how easy it is.
For me, like, if I'm doing something that's like a little offbeat, like, I try and look for like, what's the story, like, because maybe there's another way in other than already being into hip hop. Maybe one of the artists has like an interesting story, or the music's about something that can resonate with people, and try to find that angle and then tell that to people, because that might just be another way in.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Rolling off that point, one of our artists is actually a Chilean rapper who spits purely in Spanish, and we were thinking like, that is amazing. We want to get more people like interested in that kind of style, not hearing words in English, just listening to the music and being involved with that.
Yeah, it's telling people what you find interesting about it, because they don't know it right now. You know that, and I'm way more interested in the event now that I know that. You know, it works. Like,
Oh, shit, okay.
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, get a good video. That's the best thing. The best PR you can get is a really good video. Stick it on a reel, watch the likes roll in, watch the tickets go. There you go.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Good luck. Good luck with the event. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for coming to the panel today. I hope that you've learned something, or at least enjoyed your hour. We are at the end of the speaking part of today's Launchpad conference, but now we're into the fun bit where you get to go talk to each other and have a free. Is there a free drink?
Yes.
I get a free. I have a free drink.
You all just get a free drink. So it's just downstairs in the cafe.
Thank you so much, Kat. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Have a lovely day.
Put an event on for me, him, the only person I've ever seen.